Welcome to Global Risk Community Chat. Today we are joined by Christine Uri. I'm very happy to have you here today, Christine. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the chance to talk to your audience.
Yes, of course. Likewise, I'm glad we get to talk to you today. Before we get into the topic, can you start by briefly introducing yourself to our audience?
Of course. I'm Christine. I'm the Chief Legal and Sustainability Officer at ENGIE Impact. ENGIE Impact is a company that guides corporations through their sustainability transformation. So that's our primary sphere. And in my role, I have responsibility, of course, for legal, our internal sustainability program, as well as our ethics and compliance.
Super nice, super cool. What topic would you like to discuss with us today on that end?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about how ESG, environment, social, and governance is really coming more into a compliance sphere and how we need to be thinking about it from a risk perspective.
Cool, then, well, go ahead. The stage is yours. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. So ESG, environment, social, and governance, is a set of non-financial measurements of performance of companies. And what we're seeing in the market today is that investors, employees, consumers are really asking more from companies on these non-financial performance metrics, and governments are as well. So this is really coming into regulations that are being enacted around the world. So we see them in Europe, we see things in the UK, we see things in the US. I know it's becoming more part of security disclosures for companies. And there's definitely a brand pressure to be performing really well in these areas. So I love to talk to risk and compliance professionals about this because I feel like there's an opportunity for risk and compliance to have a unique approach and leadership on these topics.
Yeah. Would you perhaps then want to share some key things about this unique parts or unique opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So the process of looking at environment or social or governance issues is really the same to a general risk management process. So you think about this in terms of carbon, because carbon is a very big social topic right now and something that a lot of governments are beginning to regulate. So if you start the process, and let's say you don't have anything in place with respect to carbon, so what I'd do is start by gathering your key stakeholders to find out what are your carbon risks. It could be that you're running a professional services firm and it's really around travel when we're not in a pandemic time, or you may be part of an industrial company that has significant industrial emissions. But you start there just to kind of gauge what your risk is. Then you move into a data collection phase because you need to know what your baselines are. And here you're probably going to need a little bit of expertise and maybe engage externally from a carbon accounting firm. It can be difficult to figure out how those measurements are exactly done. I would next look at your risks. So let's say you have your carbon footprint, you know what industry you're in, you know what countries you're in. Take a look and see if there's any disclosure regulations related to those. Because as I said, more and more there are disclosure regulations that require a certain kind of reporting. And I think what you're going to see governments do, probably more outside the US than in the US, is shift towards actual substantive regulations in this, not just a disclosure. But you definitely want to know what your regulatory context is and expand a little bit beyond that. Think about what your risk is from a reputational standpoint. Think about investors and insurers are having a lot of emphasis on this because as we move into a climate change reality, a lot of investments are going to be impacted by climate change. So you look at it, you do kind of your risk analysis and put together a standard mitigation plan. So this is something, if you're used to managing risk or compliance, you'll be used to setting up mitigation measures. And what a mitigation plan looks like for carbon is figuring out, okay, well, here's our carbon footprint, here's where it's coming from, where can we actually make a difference? Start with things that are easier to resolve. Hopefully, those are also things that have a high impact. But I'd really partner with finance on this particular area because there can be financial costs and financial benefits. For example, let's say you're using a lot of carbon through your lighting system. If you upgrade your lighting system to be more with LEDs, you're going to have a significant energy cost savings. But doing that will require capital outlay in order to get it going. So being really working with your finance department on something like that, or let's say it's transition to an electric fleet. There's an upfront cost, but then you have savings in fuel. So to be able to put together that kind of plan, figure out what your mitigations are, then figure out how you're going to track and report on it. You set a goal, you set a KPI, you need to figure out how to track it. And then, I'd really encourage people who are on this journey to find a way to share the journey, on their webpage with their clients and talk about what they're doing transparently, because there's so many stakeholders that really appreciate this work is being done. And from there, it's just repeat every year or every 2 years, because you're not going to be perfect overnight. I always say the important thing is to just start somewhere. Don't let the fact that you may not be perfect overnight stop you from taking any action, because this issue isn't going to go away. It's going to continue to grow in importance over the next decade.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think on the end that the earlier these companies or people start implementing these ESG or like complying with them can also bring a really good impact on the world. So yes. I want to ask like one follow-up question on that end, because I heard you talk about like how already starting implementing, even though if it's small. So can you maybe share some few examples on what these things could be, like very simple, easy answers on those?
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, ESG is environment, social, and governance. As risk and compliance professionals, you will already be very familiar with governance. That's how you structure oversight of the organization, your ethics, your compliance. You probably already have those in place because those are more traditional. Your social components would be more around labor. It might be around diversity, equity, and inclusion, or human rights. And depending on the industry you are, those may be very important issues. And then the environment, carbon, water, waste are the things that you think about. So if you're, and so you have to select, what's really the biggest risk and the biggest impact for your company that you want to go after. But for example, let's say you think your biggest risk is in labor. So it could be that your company outsources labor to markets that might not have the best labor practices. So you'd want to set up something so that you can vet your subcontractors and your partners and make sure that they are following the labor practices that you would expect, even if they may not be legally required in their country. So that would be a great one to go after. Or, let's say you're a smaller business and you need something that's just more near to you. Everybody has employees. And so looking at the diversity, equity, and inclusion in your hiring practices and in your retention practices is a great way to go after, improving your social performance. And it's something that your stakeholders, again, will want to hear about. Your employees will appreciate, your customers will appreciate, and it will make a difference in your business. And then on the environment side, carbon really is the big gorilla at the table right now because of the urgency of climate change. Some businesses, though, may have other impacts that are equally as present. So if you're, let's say you're manufacturing bottled water, waste would be a big issue for you as well as water. So going after those things. But for your basic business, I would suggest really focusing on carbon, because that has the most concern at the moment from regulators. And let's say again, you're a small business or you're a professional services firm, start with simple things like if you're purchasing airline tickets, buy offsets at the same time, or, choose to fly less. That can have a big impact. Thinking about it right now in terms of how if you're having return to work planning, commuting can have a real significant impact on your carbon footprint. So maybe you don't want employees back 5 days a week. Maybe you want to have a more flexible approach. If you have particularly large car commuting, that can have a significant impact. Your buildings, are you in buildings that are responsible? Do you have, is there a way to reduce your building footprint? If you reduce your square footage, you'll be using less energy. So it can really be scaled up and down depending on the size of your business and the particular concerns that your business touches.
No, I think that's a really good summary of what things to look for, and especially the last part with the transportation and everything. Also, not only for, of course, just compliance people or just the entrepreneurs, but for all of us, these are important things to think about, like how much we consume certain things that can actually reduce the carbon footprint as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Think about how much you order from Amazon. I mean, I order stuff from Amazon too, but that endless flow of goods, it does have an impact.
True. Well, we are running kind of short on our time, so I want to finish up with one last question, and that is, how it is for you to be in general, be part of like a compliance or a risk community, like what it has brought you so far?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the risk community and the compliance community because I know that the professionals in it, I mean, you get into this area because you want to make a difference, and you're already so involved in the ethics. And I think by taking this opportunity to bring in the environmental and social components to the governance, it's an opportunity to really up-level, the position and how people think about compliance and risk, and bring things from that might be from, okay, what do we need to do in order to comply, to that question of what's the right thing to do. And if you can take your culture across the company and have it the focus be on what's the right thing to do, then a lot of the issues that we see in compliance and risk are going to be lessened, and your company will have a better impact. I think we all love feeling like we're having a better impact on the world, and this is an opportunity for us to do it as compliance and risk professionals.
Super nice. Thank you for also sharing your opinion on that. And that kind of concludes our time, unfortunately, with today that we have. So thank you so much again for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you.
Yes. Have a great day.
Mm-hmm.